And it's working because it's green, so I'll set to go. I'll go through my opening of the session and we can answer questions. Good evening, my name is Dr. Craig Clark. I'm Executive Director of the Allegheny County Industrial Development Agency, and in connection with the revision of the Allegheny County IDA Uniform Tax Exemption Policy, which is the subject of this public hearing. Today I'm holding this public hearing to allow citizens to make a statement for the record relating to the agency revising the Allegheny County IDA Uniform Tax Exemption Policy. The Executive Director of the agency caused notice of this public hearing to be mailed on June 25th to the Chief Executive Officers of the Allegheny County, all towns and school districts in the county, and published on June 27th in the Spectator newspaper of general circulation in the county. Copies of the public notice are available on our website. And unless there's an objection, I'm going to suggest waiving reading the full public notice and instead request the full text of notice will be put in the public hearing. The comments received today at the public hearing will be presented to the members of the agency prior to the meeting at which members of the agency will consider whether to approve this revised UTEP. And the notice of the public hearing indicated that written comments should be addressed to Dr. Craig Clark, the Executive Director of the agency, and no written comments have been received prior to this public hearing. Other than that, I'll open the public hearing at 6:03, and we ask that everyone let me know and address me as far as who you are and your affiliation, which I already asked you to give me. And we'll give you as much time as you want to speak. Try to stay to 3 minutes the first time, but we'll flexible because there's not too much, but that's what we normally do. And we'll stay open for at least 15 minutes, depending upon how much discussion we have. So you both have the UTEP, and are there any questions about the edits? What we're doing is we're primarily adding the green or clean energy section. We have had 14 small 5 megawatt systems approved in the county the last year and a half. And we were operating under a standard procedure, but we wanted to make sure we had that in a policy so everybody knew what the policy was. And so that's where the changes have come from, is what we revised and what we've been using on the other pilots that we've developed over that year and a half. So if there are any questions on the revisions, please address and let me know, and just let me know.
I've got some comments.
Sure. Okay, Norm.
I'll do them now.
Yep.
I'm bothered by all these reductions in assessments and tax breaks. 1/3 of Allegheny County is already tax exempt. How about doing something about putting some of the IDA holdings back on the tax roll?
The only IDA holdings we have is what's rest of the truck stop.
Is the what?
Is the truck stop itself. The truck stop land, we have about 22 acres.
I think there's some other little parcels in there.
There is a parking lot which we'd like to get taken care of, because we really don't. There's no reason for us to own that.
National Fuel Gas is the largest taxpayer in Allegheny County. Do they receive the same tax breaks when they put a pipeline in or a compressor station?
Since I've been on the board, they've not requested one now.
Crown Castle pays property taxes on its cell towers. I don't believe they had any pilot program when they were put in.
Not to my knowledge, no.
Pardon?
Not to my knowledge, Norm.
Yet the first year that was put in Cuba, the assessed value was $120,000. So we don't offer it really equally. The population of Allegheny County is shrinking, leaving fewer and fewer people to pay the taxes. Taxpayers are already subsidizing green energy. Houghton College put in a $5 million solar complex. Payback of this cost and energy saving will take 42 years. The life expectancy of a solar panel is only 25 years. How's that very practical? I'll give you this list.
Okay, I'd like to have
Right.
it. Let's just thank you, Norm.
If solar fields can't turn a profit, they shouldn't be built. The consumer needs to start paying the increased energy costs associated with going green now. To make green energy profitable without subsidies. Then we'll see how quickly they want to abandon fossil fuels. Because the taxpayer is paying ultimately through the back door. He isn't paying for the service yet. Solar fields are now competing for land that is growing our food. Everybody seeks flat, well-drained soil for their project. You had that with Great Lakes cheese out here. Those are my comments.
Okay.
I can further comment. I've been in business 50 years now, and I've never received any help.
Well, as I said, Norm, this is being recorded. It'll be a public.
That's fine.
You know that. Not just saying, but it'll also be. I'm making notes because it'll be passed on to the board.
I think if you're going to equalize things a little bit between counties, the first truck stop up here put about between 5 and 6 million gallons of fuel a year through. And when I was on the legislature, I said, you know, in order to be competitive, you need to be at the tax rate of everybody around you. And that 0.5% makes a world of difference.
Yes.
I have interests in 2 counties. And over in Cattaraugus County, it's 8%, here it's 8.5%. Most of my fuel, in fact, all of my fuel now gets delivered to Cattaraugus County. My oil too. That's worth about $1,500 a year, that 0.5% to me. So you need to get the legislature to get competitive with their neighbors. And this competing IDAs, you know, it's just like the truck stop that was here, went down to Canona. Right? All of a sudden, Canona has 2 of them.
2 down there, yes.
One of them I see is gone now. One bought the other one out apparently. But, you know, I mentioned the sales tax differential. You know, on a couple 100 gallons of fuel, a trucker comes in and gets, all of a sudden it starts to add up, that 0.5%.
Do you have any other comments on the UTEP?
What's that?
Are there any comments on the UTEP?
No.
I just want to see if there are any other comments.
Can I have one clarification?
Yes.
Okay, I noticed that in a couple of places you differentiated between small alternate energy facility projects and solar projects. What is the difference? How are you differentiating between that? Because I noticed that you have a different timeline for abatements or exemptions, whatever, for the small alternate energy facility projects. They're different from the solar energy projects. So what do you use?
Where are you referencing?
The second page, real property tax abatements B. I'm trying to understand how you're differentiating between what you're calling a small alternate energy facility project and a solar energy project. What is the difference? Under B.
B, right.
Okay, that's the first place that I see it listed. It's the small alternate energy facility project is in black, so that's not a change. So
Right.
I'm just trying to figure out how you're differentiating between that and the solar changes, the solar energy.
No, we're not what do you mean by differentiating? Because basically we've added it in 20 years for all these projects and 20 years for solar energy projects, because they basically use also adaptive. So 15 years right now is for adaptive reuse, tourism destination projects, small alternative energy facility projects, and commercial wind energy or energy storage projects. And then when we do solar energy projects, they typically are asking for 20 years.
Okay, so what is the difference between a solar energy project and a small alternate energy facility project?
That would not be these large 5 megawatt projects. It'd be quite small, something that we probably wouldn't entertain, but it would, I don't know, we have not had one. That was in the original UTEP. We're just adding the solar energy piece.
Okay, so essentially you're making a differentiation between, under the small alternate energy facility projects would be something like tiers 1 and 2, and the commercial.
We're not defining how long they are, except for everything else is 15 years, and typically a solar energy project wants at least 20 years.
Could I make a comment on that?
Yes.
Perhaps this small energy thing is small individual oil companies and gas companies.
It says alternate energy.
It says alternate, it didn't say energy, so no.
That's all.
That was in the original one.
Is setting up a generator, power with natural gas out there.
Because when we wrote this, it would have been in 2000, I'm not even sure which year it was written, solar energy projects really weren't coming out. So there would have been, I don't know what another small alternative energy would be. We've not had one requested.
Okay, I think I need some more clarification on that, because we are mucking around in between what's tier 1s, 2, and 3s. So
Tier 1, 2, and 3 regarding
solar projects.
Size-wise?
Yes, how they come under, if there's any differentiation.
No, there isn't any differentiation. If it's a solar energy project, it would be typically 20 years. Is that what you're asking? It didn't matter which
Okay,
tier.
even if it is a tier like 2, which is the 110% roughly of the domestic use of a particular residence or.
We're not going to be giving pilots for residential use. Is that what you're asking?
Basically, yes, I am. I just was looking for a specific clarification so that I can.
Now, these pilots are
Bring that
typically
to-
for 1 to 5 megawatt projects.
Okay, good.
Projects.
1, 2, 5.
We've never had one less than 1 megawatt. Most of them are 5. And isn't cost effective to put these up with probably less than 1.
Okay, well, when we go back to our public hearing and someone comes in and says, well, I want to put one on my rooftop, we're gonna have to be able to tell them that.
We don't do those.
Right, but that's not going to be considered under this particular thing, okay. And then while I'm on the same subject, the state of New York, if they push something through under the 94C,
The large projects.
the huge commercial projects that, not community solar, not your up to 5 megawatts.
Now, typically they're over 20, but they're usually around 100 megawatts.
Right. How are the pilots figured in for that? Is that something that the county has considered when you're discussing this pilot
These are the
law?
larger ones, which basically, it is in here. Basically, the smaller ones typically are $2,500 for the pilot, and that depending upon what you can negotiate as a host agreement. And we have the same basic discussion, except for typically would not be a total of 5,000 per megawatt for everything. It's probably closer to 3,500. It's on page. About 4 definitions. The schedule for solar energy projects. There's 2. That's why there's 2 things in here. One says typically the pilot and host agreement should be in the range of 5,000 AC for the smaller projects, and the larger ones typically be for 3,500.
Okay, so what you're saying though is that the state is not going to be exempt from.
No.
Okay, that was another
No.
clarification.
If a community decides not to give them pilots, the state says they have the authority to negotiate the pilots themselves, which isn't the place you want to be.
Right. Now, does that only apply to the ones that the state decides to site themselves, or does that also?
The larger projects, if it's over 5 megawatts, it's 94 seats. I mean, there are some projects where they'll do multiple 5 megawatts,
Right.
but typically when they get over 20 megawatts, they consider them the larger projects, which we don't, which the town, then it goes through the state process.
Okay.
And that's why we really didn't define what larger was, except for typically larger than 5 megawatts, because it's really up to the state on those.
One more.
Sure.
We did a solar moratorium law for our town so we can write a solar law. In my research for doing that, one of the things I stumbled across a number of times was that some municipalities have chosen not to do a pilot because these projects seem to change hands so many times that they are rewriting a pilot for each new owner or leasee or whatever. Have you investigated that? I mean, do you know how that works? I mean, has that happened? Of course, we're just getting into it
We just
right
have
now.
one, but typically that's why all of these developers develop the projects as an LLC, so they can do what you just said. So the actual pilot and or payment will be through that LLC.
It'll be through that, and if they change the LLC, you still have to renegotiate.
Well, they're not gonna change the LLC, that's why they make an LLC, because it's an entity that owns that. You see what I'm saying?
But I'm
Another
reading where those entities have been sold to another entity.
Another mothership may buy that entity. Yes.
Right, and each time another mothership buys that entity, then that pilot has to be renegotiated. That's what I've been coming across in the research that I've been doing. Is there have been some that have, I should have printed it and brought it.
Okay, I'll verify that.
Okay.
We only have one in that context right now.
Okay, all right. That's good enough.
Because usually it's pretty transferable, it's not an issue. At least the pilot, I don't know about the host agreement, I can verify the host agreement.
Okay.
I'll get back to you on that. Do you have any questions?
No, I'm just not thrilled in subsidizing something that can never pay for itself. And solar will never stand on its own. So if it's ever made to stand on its own, it will flop over, and then we've got garbage all over our fields. So, I mean, subsidizing something that will actually have a net profit someday is, subsidizing that with taxpayer money is one thing, but subsidizing something will never ever possibly stand on its own just doesn't seem like a good idea. And then not only that, on a bigger scale, beyond Allegheny County, once we've subsidized solar and such for such a long time, and our dependency becomes moved to solar and then those things that can never support themselves, then everything else disappears, and then sooner or later you have no choice but to keep throwing money into something that is never cost effective. And then you have Texas, and it's a brittle. You can put some amount of solar on your grid, but the more solar you put on your grid, the more your grid can't make up for when it's a frozen day and everybody turns their heat on at once, or it's in the summer and everybody turns their air conditioner on at once, and the grid fails, just like it did in Texas. So they blame it on the fact that this plant couldn't ramp up and that plant couldn't ramp up, but the reality of it is, minus the solar, those plants would have already been online like they used to be. They're only offline because it was solar, and then when the solar couldn't keep up, Texas shut off. And we're building the same thing in New York State. I think it's a horrible idea.
So that directs me back to whether or not the county with a pilot is subsidizing by allowing abatements, or whether the county expects to get a tax return from the pilots. What does the county actually expect will happen with this flow of money?
Well, the exemptions are, as both parties have already said, are tax exemptions,
Okay,
meaning they're not paying full taxes.
okay,
So in essence, there is another subsidy, I guess you could call it. It's a tax exemption, but it's not really a true subsidy. We don't give them any money.
Don't give them money, but
but
Not full tax.
you're not getting money from them. You're not getting enough money from them.
As we talked about earlier, you're not getting full taxing on the improvements, correct?
But then Allegheny County, after the solar farm is built, then what does Allegheny County get out of it? They're not jobs.
Now the pilots and the host agreements go to the taxing authorities. Yeah, the only jobs for these projects are short-term construction jobs. A small 5 megawatt project is typically 50 or 60 people for about 3 months. Maybe 4.
So what is the county's actual position on this, rather than just talking about a pilot? I mean,
I don't represent the
you
county.
don't represent the county, okay, gotcha. So does
There's
the,
been no objection to this, if that's what you're asking.
so the IDA, which is the Industrial Development Agency, does the IDA feel that this is actually to do this? Does the IDA feel that this is actually a good development?
We see the benefits are, and it's an argument because some people say it's not benefiting, but the landowner obviously gets a lease payment, which is typically larger than they could make through ag, which is somewhat of a problem because it gets land off the ag area, but I'm just telling you, so they benefit. And then the taxing authorities and the town through the host agreements do get funds through pilots.
Well, ultimately, these projects can only happen if we give them a tax break, and so then my tax break money goes to these individuals that lease the land to them. I mean, if I'm gonna give up some tax benefit, or I'm gonna give up some of my tax dollars as an individual, I'd like to see everybody in the county benefit, not a few landowners. So what net benefit do all the residents of Allegheny County derive from solar farms?
Well, that comes back to the town approving the projects, because we don't approve projects, we just do the pilots if the town wants a project. I guess that's a misconception. We're only dealing with the tax exemption piece. It's the town that makes the decision if they want to have clean, as we've talked about before, the clean energy in their town. It's not the county making the decision.
Well, I'm about as liberal as you're gonna get, okay? I'm all for green, clean energy, but it has to be done the right way. I mean, I don't believe that it's clean energy in our town, because it goes into the grid and it's then sold to other people who don't want solar panels on their roof and think that they're enjoying a community benefit, which it's not. It's someone from Westchester County enjoying the benefit of the community of the town of Willing. NIMBY, not in my backyard, it's not in Westchester's, it's in ours. And, but I still have to learn all these things so that I help make the right decisions for the town of Willing. So.
Yeah, I understand all the concerns, but that's, all we're doing is offering, like I said, where towns are willing to do this and want to do it. That's the only place that we're working with towns and developers.
Well, yeah, my position is that as a town, we have to understand how this process works and what influence the process will have on making that decision. I mean, if there wasn't the process of a pilot program developed and put into effect by the county, then the town has a different system or a different whole set of parameters to look at when making those decisions. I mean, if there was no suggestion of pilots or host agreements or anything, things would possibly work out a different way. I mean, the people would say, well, we don't want you taxing us, we don't get any benefit. That's that, and then the state of New York would come and put it there anyway. But how a pilot helps people make decisions as to whether they want something in their backyard or not has to be taken into consideration. I mean, the pilot becomes part of the process.
Sure. Are there any other comments or questions about the UTEP? And I'd like your comments, Norm, so I can add them. I mean, they'll be added because I've already recorded it, but it'd be helpful if I had.
I just have one question.
Sure.
How did the figure of $2,500 per, what's it, megawatt, how was that figure reached?
We looked at what was reasonable for both the different share from the town and the other entities, and that was the number that we set. There was no magic number. Is that what you're asking?
I was just wondering if it
The
was.
typical rates, as you've been looking around in the area, is about it depends on the county, and $5,000 to $6,000 per megawatt. And we just decided about half of that would be the pilot for the county, the town, and the school district, and the other half of the house goes through. There was nothing magic about it.
the pilot is based on the, potential
No, it's not potential, it's per installed megawatt.
per installed.
Doesn't matter how much it produces.
Okay, so if they produce nowhere near,
If they produce nothing, it doesn't matter, it's been installed.
they still, okay, per installed. So if it goes belly up within the middle, I mean, before it ever goes online, but they've installed it.
Well, it has to be operational, I mean, it's not like it's installed and never get, because you have to turn it on. You just have to turn it on.
Okay.
Because you know what I'm saying, because quite often, we have one right now, it took a while to get the authority to turn it on. So once it's on, then it doesn't matter what it produces, but you're obviously not going to start charging or have to pay as they build it or as it gets installed. Because sometimes it takes a little while for the building inspector to actually approve it.
Okay, so taking it a step further, after 2 years, it becomes non-profitable for the LLC that puts it in there, and they decide to walk away and abandon it. Are they still gonna have to pay their share of the pilot?
There's a decommissioning process. They'll have to take it out. There will be no pilots, there's nothing there.
After they actually take it out,
Because
okay.
they're gonna require, there's a decommissioning process, so they would be taking it out if they actually do what you said. That's one of the parts of the solar law that you need to have.
I'm gonna see what binds them to take it out. I've heard horror stories of them not taking them out.
Yeah, this is actually, I see it all over.
Can I just finish this?
Okay,
Because
sorry.
I'm really trying to deal with the UTEP. I don't mind answering questions, but to
Okay.
keep going about, because this really isn't about UTEP now.
Okay,
You see what I'm saying?
yeah.
Are there any other UTEP? If not, we'll close the public hearing. Thanks.